This is Paul McGUIRE. You're listening and watching the Paul McGUIRE Report. Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest sex trafficking event in the world. What does that tell you about America? And this is happening all over the world. And this is the secret. This is what, listen to what I'm saying, whether you like it or not. And I'm saying this to be unkind. I'm saying this with the motivation in my heart of waking you up. They are being victimized at an unspeakable level. And this is what you need to know. So the people behind this are liars. They're Satanists. They're totalitarians. They're liars. So everything they say, you can't trust them. Just like you can't trust a cartel member or a drug dealer. They're liars. And yet the Great Reset people, the trillionaires and billionaires, are saying, they're lying to the masses, and they're saying stuff like, you will own absolutely nothing, but you'll never be happier in your whole life. You think those kids that own nothing, they don't even own their own bodies, they don't own their own minds, they're forced to do unspeakable things. They don't own anything. You think they're happier than they've ever been in their whole life in these totalitarian nations, in these New World Order nations? Do you think that they're happier than they've ever been in their whole life? Do you really believe that? No, you don't believe that any more than I do. That's a lie. They are not happier than they've ever been in their whole life. They've been stripped down that they own nothing. And they've never been in more hell and anguish than they've ever been in their whole life. All you have to do is look at history. And I talk about it in my books. Go to paulmcguire.us and buy the books, for crying out loud, and learn what's coming next. Hitler said his goal was the New World Order. The New World Order or the Great Reset is the same thing. If you look at what Hitler did, we're on the same fast track as Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. They tortured the children, they tortured the adults, they inflicted unspeakable pain and suffering and torture and murder and cruelty and sex trafficking and child rape and woman rape and unspeakable horrors they inflicted upon the people. And guess what the response of the people was? The same response of the people in America today, in which people say, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. And they and the Jews and the Christians and everybody else, when they were standing in line to go into the ovens where they were going to burn their bodies alive to death, or when they were standing in line to go into the gas chambers where they were going to murder them through poisonous gas, they were literally standing on the outside of the doorway, and in 1 second's walk they would be in the inner gas chamber or in the inner ovens. And yet they couldn't bring themselves to believe that they were going to get gassed to death or burnt alive in the ovens. They could not possibly conceive that kind of hell on earth. They couldn't conceive of the fact that some people are so evil that they would do that. So there's a disconnect. People, when they get this stuff shoved in their face, they can't conceive of the fact that anybody could be so inhumane that they would actually do this to little children or their fellow man. So their brain short circuit. They can't handle it. They can't bring themselves to believe in the horrors. So when you peel back the veil of the New World Order, I just gave you a glimpse. Do I need to tell you the kind of torture experiments that were performed on young girls, young boys, little baby boys, little baby girls? The kind of rapes, do I need to spell it out? No, I can't bring myself, I can't do it. I just, you got the message. So, the Nazi scientists, the Nazi politicians, and who financed all that? The international bankers on Wall Street financed it. Just like the international bankers financed the communist revolution and the international bankers financed the Russian communist revolution and they financed the communist Chinese revolution. Because when you get rid of God, when you reject right and wrong, you are opening the gates of hell. And you're opening portals from hell and you're summoning the demons, the fallen angels, the synthetic DNA people. You're summoning the same gods, the same demon gods that the ancient pagan tribes worshipped as they burnt their babies alive in human sacrifice. So, the gods of Ashtaroth and Molech and gods like that, where the ritual was barbaric and inhuman at the highest level. Okay, I've said all this not for sensationalism. I said all this to inform you and educate you. There's no reason, there's no justification to be asleep at a time like this. You can't justify it. God is calling all of his true people right now. God is calling us, me and you, and millions of his children. God is calling us now to rise to the challenge. Rise in defense of the innocent. Rise to preach the gospel. Rise to communicate the truth and not the lies about what's really going on. Now I want to close this out and summarize it. You need to go to paulmcguire.us and remember, it takes money to fight a spiritual war. I was minutes away from watching everything that we have slaved to to acquire technologically so we can spread this message. I was minutes away from having it go up in flames, but thank God the wind changed direction at the last minute. And so I say to you, go to paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and I'm asking you, based on what I just told you, I'm asking you to take a stand to participate in this spiritual war. And I'm asking you, based on what God is telling you to do in your heart, and you know what you're supposed to do, just like I know what I'm supposed to do in my heart, take a stand for God, and then whatever God tells you to do, obey the Lord. I don't care how large an amount God is telling you to give in terms of a gift, or how small amount. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you willing to radically obey God and give financially as He commands you to? Are you willing to enter the spiritual battle, knowing that a spiritual battle requires finances? So I'm asking you to go to paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us. It's totally secure. You can donate electronically. You can send in a check securely. There's the mailing address there. And we need your help right away. Everything that I've said is connected, but we need you to give as the Lord leads you to give. The key is obedience to the Lord. Okay, so I just want to quickly review the hidden agenda behind everything that's going on. Everything that's going on is not haphazard or random chance. These fires are not an accident. You understand what I'm saying? The fires are not an accident. The systematic destruction and ruination of all the infrastructure that should have been put in place years ago to prevent fires, to properly irrigate the water. I mean, one thing is really simple. It's a no-brainer. Here in California, we take all the water when it rains, and we get rains a lot, even on a bad year. We take all the water that comes from the skies and we let it go in these massive sewer systems, and the massive sewer systems take all the water that's coming from the sky in the rain, goes through the sewer systems, and then is absorbed by the Pacific Ocean. So massive gallons of water are coming from the sky and flowing through a very sophisticated system which spills, just wastes the water. Millions and millions of gallons are wasted. So now we're in a crisis, like we have crises all the time, and they don't have sufficient water pressure, they don't have sufficient water to put out the fires. You saw it on television. The reason they don't have the water pressure to put out the fires, the reason they can't put out the fires, is they don't have water, because all the water that they should be recycling and collecting in giant reservoirs, they're not doing that. They're sending all of that useful water into the Pacific Ocean, which is like insanity. What should be happening is when it rains, the waters should be collected through a drainage system, and then the waters should be stored up in reservoirs and other massive reservoir type of containers and dammed water. And I don't mean that in the vernacular, I mean dammed water in the sense that we have these massive acreages in California, one's right near here, that can hold, I don't know how, how many millions of gallons of water, but it's not. It's just letting the water slide into the Pacific Ocean. You store the water, you bank the water, and then you fill the reservoirs and the dams and the lakes and all the places that were built in the first place to store water, to stop forest fires, etc., to stop droughts. They're all available. What is preventing the usage of millions and millions of gallons of water? What's preventing their usage are these absolutely insane, hyper, radical, extreme, off-the-chart environmental policies which legally make it illegal for people to store up the water in reservoirs, to properly irrigate the land. When you come to California, all you see is endless acres of dry brush, brown dry brush. One spark can ignite what you saw in Pacific Palisades. So even here where I am, up in the hills, dry brush, endless millions of acres of dry brush. The slightest spark, the slightest increase in wind, the whole place burns. And it all can be prevented if you modified the law. You could still be environmentally sound and at the same time manage your water, keep the water in giant reservoirs, and do all the what they call fire mitigation procedures. But the fire departments have been forbidden by the radical environmentalist lobbies. The fire departments have been forbidden from conducting prudent fire mitigation. Fire mitigation is a fancy word for we're going to store up the water, we're going to make sure there's a distance between this row of trees and that row of trees, and we're going to do all the things that we're supposed to be doing to begin with. There never has to be an apocalyptic fire again. I was listening to President Trump recount how he was talking to the governor of California and telling the governor of California that California does not need to have these apocalyptic fires. And Trump went on to say that he was talking to the Prime Minister of the nation of Austria. And the Prime Minister of the nation of Austria said to Trump that the vegetation and the forests that are all around our cities and communities is 1,000 times more flammable than the vegetation and the trees that are around your cities and communities in California. And then the Prime Minister of Austria said, and we have been dealing with massive forests, and we have prevented massive forest fires for thousands of years by properly doing fire mitigation. And certain simple, and then the head of Austria said, it's far cheaper to mitigate potential fires than it is to build and repair everything in the trillions of dollars after you've burned it all to hell. And so the head of Austria said, we have massive green forests, massive vegetation. And then he again reiterated to President Trump, but we don't have these apocalyptic fires in all these European nations. It's unheard of. So why do the European nations not have these apocalyptic fires and California does? It's because California is doing nothing in terms of being prudent, fire mitigation, and everything is ready to go apocalyptic. And even though the vegetation in Austria and across Europe is far more flammable, than it is in California, there's no need for these apocalyptic fires. The head of Austria, the Prime Minister of Austria said, we just don't have these problems. We have been taking care of forest and fire management, he said, for century after century. It's unheard of across the European nations to have these apocalyptic fires. It's unheard of. And then the Prime Minister of Austria said, all of the European nations that I'm talking about, including Austria, we prioritize all kinds of environmental concerns. We prioritize all kinds of ecological concerns. And they're really, really big on making sure they're environmentally sound and friendly. They're not sacrificing the environment to stop fires. That's a complete mythology. And so none of this stuff, according to the Prime Minister of Austria and the European nations, these apocalyptic fires that are cyclical in California, they don't have to be happening. This is the result of bureaucratic bungling, complete criminal mismanagement of our water systems, of our fire mitigation systems. This is human error on steroids. And so, in order for us to fix this, because if we're going to survive, and the same thing is true for floods and hurricanes and everything else, if we're going to survive as a nation and be viable, we have to adopt these already tried and true, proven, successful fire prevention strategies that already work in places like Austria that have massive forests and massive vegetation. They've been successfully managing potential fires for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it requires a change of thinking, the application of wisdom and knowledge, and executing and developing a environmentally friendly, ecologically sound new system of fire prevention. And it can be done. It's a winnable war. The same thing is true with, you keep hearing in California, oh, we've got to raise the price of food because of the drought. That's a bunch of baloney. They're using an artificially manufactured drought as an excuse or a pretense to artificially or synthetically skyrocket the price of food. And all of this is being done intentionally. Did you hear what I said? All of this is being done intentionally. And now the unspeakable, but I write about it in my books, like Power from On High, the unspeakable scenario is, since 1941, America has had secret weather modification technologies that can change the weather. Through spraying things in the atmosphere, we can accelerate the winds, we can de-accelerate the winds, we can literally cause it to rain on command with existing weather modification technology. And in addition to that, weather modification technology also includes what's called DEWs, directed energy weapons. Directed energy weapons, that's when you look at certain locations like Lahaina, Maui, Paris, Northern California, North Carolina, and other places around the world. You look at communities that have been hit with such an intense heat of synthetic artificial fire using weather modification weapons, and you literally vaporize entire cities and communities. You can tell cars are melted. The way the evidence of Lahaina and all these other places, the evidence that they were hit with directed energy weapons can be seen plainly by looking at the visual evidence of the aftermath or the leftover of these fires, even the recent ones. I saw pictures of the fire, Pacific Palisades in that area. There, you look at the video footage carefully. I'm not going to tell you anything. You gotta go to a channel that's not going to censor it. You have to go to a channel that's not going to censor it. You got to look at the raw video, and you will see very strange evidence of very strange kinds of fires, which left over as evidence a vaporization so intense it looked like Lahaina and these other places were hit with a nuclear weapon. Cars melting. Stuff that's melted and vaporized, and then a rooftop that is blue and nothing happens to it. I saw a person's t-shirt, everything around it is melted, but the t-shirt blue is perfectly intact. And then I just happened to hear, by the providence of God, about a 30-minute interview with a lady who was what's called a targeted individual, and this lady, it was very credible. It's her testimony that she was firsthand attacked by what is called the Havana syndrome. The Havana syndrome is when you use EMF, electromagnetic frequency technologies, that's like 5G and 6G, at certain numerical frequency points, and you can make people sick, incrementally die, have cancer, or whatever. She's slowly dying because she was hit externally by electromagnetic frequency weapons, and she became a whistleblower and told her she worked for many years for the intelligence agencies. And it was a stunning eye-opener to listen to her give her first-hand testimony of what happened to her own physical body, what happened to physical locations that she was aware of, and geographic locations that she was aware of, when they were hit by various numerically calibrated electromagnetic frequencies that were fired at her, other people, and certain locations from a long distance. And she's dying from all kinds of autoimmune diseases. So the question is not whether or not these technologies exist. According to the first-hand testimony of an intelligence agency insider, she is saying publicly that these weapons are viable and they're being used. It has been public knowledge. It's been a matter of declassified reports. Other whistleblowers have come forward, and they have come forward to tell, based on facts, that this vast array of weather modification technologies, EMFs, which can also change brain waves and many, many other things, have been operational since 1941. So with that, it's obvious, isn't it, that you and I are in a war for information, a war for truth. So I ask you to join with me in this war. I ask you to pray to God and ask God to show you how much you can give to help us and to financially support us in spreading this information far and wide, intelligently, in an incredible manner. This is part of the all-out war for America, and whether we remain a free nation or whether we become a nation that is in rapid decline. Droughts produce starvation. According to CIA reports, the primary precursor for a nation to have an internal revolution is when you have conditions that create mass starvation. And mass starvation is primarily caused by corruption in the government, gangs, burning down of crops, etc., etc. And one of the other primary causations of drought, severe drought, is when you synthetically modify the weather and you create such dry conditions that nothing, no vegetables, no fruits can grow. And the die-off that occurs from that kind of mass catastrophic event is a die-off which is man-made. And according to the CIA report, the number one destabilizing factor that leads a nation into a revolution, a coup d'etat, a civil war, or other forms of violent disintegration or civil war. The number one factor that causes these mass catastrophic events, the number one factor is extreme drought, which causes the food supply to disintegrate. And it is when the food supply is disintegrated that the final phase always occurs. The final phase is an internal, violent, bloody revolution, a coup where the existing government is overthrown, violence in the streets, a communist-style, totalitarian-style revolution with guns, bullets, tanks, all kinds of technologies. The main causation of those events is simply manufactured drought and the total drying up of the food supply. And so the trigger that causes revolution and a coup is when the food supply, due to drought, all the food supply is eradicated through the heat. And the trigger that causes revolution is when the people are starving to such an extent that they're actually starving from hunger due to drought and the food supply being affected. That is the trigger which causes an internal revolution. So don't think America, by the way, is immune from any of these factors. Now, you and I can pray. It's not just pray and then goof off and do nothing. I've been praying for decades, cycle after cycle of fire, and I've been praying constantly for the fires at literally my doorstep. I believe in prayer, but then I also believe in taking intelligent, strategic action and participating in a law-abiding, legal, and peaceful manner, participating in action, peaceful, law-abiding action that can implement strategic change. That's what part of being a real Christian is all about. You're connected to reality. You're connected to heaven through prayer and calling on the power of God, but you're also connected to this physical dimension reality we live in and the multi-dimensional nature of our reality. God bless you. This is Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us and help us with your donations, prayers, and contributions in spreading the word as fast as we can, because this is not the end of this little scenario. There are many things on the horizon. And we'll get into them on a later show. God bless you. This is Paul McGuire. Once again, visit paulmcguire.us.